about welfare specifically, though, Owen Smith, because after the election, the Labour Party under Harriet Harman clearly felt it should move closer to the Conservatives on welfare, not further away. The party didn't vote against their bill introducing £12 billion of savings. Harriet Harman herself said she was sympathetic to lowering the benefits cap from 26,000 to 23,000 in London. You didn't vote against a limit on child tax credits for 2 children. Were you and she wrong?
Yes, in that vote we definitely were wrong, and that's why Labour has now voted against the welfare bill. And the reason for that is the reason many people in this country, I think, have started to turn against the Conservative Party, because the tax credit changes that were at the heart of that bill and the heart of the £12 billion savings.
But you knew about the tax credits. You knew about the tax credits bill. Then you still were in favour of a benefit cap. You were still at the time in favour, in Harriet's words, of lowering that benefit cap, and you wanted to limit it to child tax credits to 2 children. So was that all a complete aberration?
Well, as I said, I think those were the wrong decisions. I argued actually within the Shadow Cabinet at the time against our abstaining on that vote. I said in my conference speech just a couple of months ago that this is no time for the Labour Party to be abstaining on whether we make poor people, working people, poorer in this country. People want the Labour Party to stand up.
Well, hang on, you say people. What's your evidence for saying that people want you to do that? Because actually Harriet Harman on this show announced that Labour didn't oppose limiting child tax credit to 2 children because she said we simply cannot say to the public that you were wrong at the election. So, again, who's representing the people here?
Well, we might point to Heidi Allen, who we got on the programme, I think, later on, or any of the other 20 or 30 or so Tory MPs who stood up against their own Prime Minister just a few weeks ago,
on tax credits,
saying that they'd got it wrong on tax credits.
Right, but let's have a look.
Taking money away. Well, the Tories describe that as welfare spending. That was part of their £12 billion at the election. So it's entirely legitimate, Joe, for me to talk about that. That's what we were opposing.
Of course it is, but it's not just that. We are talking about, you said, people want us to do this, and I'm trying to get from you the evidence for that. Yes, on tax credits, but more broadly on Labour's, or the perception of people on Labour with welfare. Because we've seen leaks from polling for Labour's Learning the Lessons task force, chaired by Margaret Beckett, in which people said Labour was in thrall to the undeserving, needs to be for middle-class voters, not just down and outs. And a Labour win would have been good for people on benefit and immigrants, anyone claiming money. How will you win an election if people only see you as representing those groups?
Well, we've got to win an election because those groups and low and middle-income earners in Britain, the very people being hit by the tax credit cuts and now the universal credit cuts that are coming on stream next year, need a Labour government in order to introduce fairness. But they also want to know that we are in favour of reform. There's no doubt about that.
Right. But where's the evidence? Where's the evidence for that? Because if you look at your own, this is your own focus groups, this is your own polling, and it is not in line with what the public want or the way they view you.
Well, that's what I just said, Joe. In addition to supporting in-work benefits for people who are in low and middle-income jobs, like tax credits and universal credit, we also need to be making an argument for reform of the wider system.
And do you accept you're not doing that?
Well, I think we're only just starting to do that. I'm going to be announcing in the new year a big new commission by the Labour Party to look at social security, to try and present a Labour alternative or a reformed social security system. There's no doubt that for generations people have increasingly become mistrustful of the social security system. People think it unfair, people think it inefficient under Labour and Tory.
Right.
And we need to win back people's trust in it, because it should be a massive positive for our country that we have a generous welfare state. It's a positive, and we need to fight for that.
Which policy decisions so far are going to back up that idea of reform rather than people's idea that you are only for people on benefits if you are trying to broaden your appeal? Well, I mean, you've talked about tax credits, but if you want to lower the benefit cap, if you now don't want to limit tax credit to 2 children, which policy areas now back up what you've just said about reform?
Well, we've said very clearly that we support the government in capping the overall spending on social security. So they've introduced the cap of
the benefit cap?
116 billion. Well, the benefit cap, interestingly, I think we've reserved judgment on. But it was only 2 weeks ago that
wasn't your view.
Well, let me finish, Joe, if I may. It was only 2 weeks ago we had a legal opinion from a judge here in London that the benefit cap was discriminating against disabled people. There is further evidence that the benefit cap isn't doing what the government set out to do. It isn't saving money because it means local councils are having to spend money on discretionary housing payments to support people who are being made homeless as a result of it. It isn't helping people back into work. It's only around 4% of people who seem to be getting any benefit. So the question is, what is this benefit cap for on individual households? Yes, we need, of course, to have a limit on the amount of money that people can have individually and as households, but it has to reflect need.
OK, well, hang on, that's important. That's important because listening to you there, it sounded like you wanted to drop the idea of a benefit cap in principle. So you still support the idea of a benefit cap at £26,000 a year?
No, we don't. We've said already...
You did, though, didn't you, at the election? You did support it.
At the election we did, and since the election we've changed our view. Our view is that cutting it to £23,000 and £20,000, which is what was included in the welfare bill. I'm afraid this stuff's very complicated in lots of numbers, but we've got to get into these numbers. That would mean that it would affect literally millions of people across Britain. It would have resulted in increased hardship for lots of families. What should the cap be, then? And would have cost money. Well, I think we need to get back to a principle that people used to understand, which is the connection between the sorts of support you might receive from the state, the amount of money you contribute, so getting back a connection between contribution and reward, but also your need. So if you've got 3 children, or if you fall pregnant in a period when you lose your job, you don't get penalised for having that 3rd child. It seems to me extraordinary.
So you aren't
that the government could be
you're not
penalising
supporting
children.
a cap at all at the moment. You can't give me a figure. You can't say that the 26,000 was right. You're now reviewing the whole policy. You agree with Jeremy Corbyn, it resulted in social cleansing?
Joe, I've been saying that for the last 2 months. There's nothing new there. We said at the election that we said shortly after the election that we were going to oppose the reduction.
But that's not true, Owen Smith. When I spoke to you last time on the Daily Politics, you said to me it was you were going to stick to the principle of a benefit cap.
No, I didn't, Joe.
You did.
No, I
you
didn't.
said in September that you wanted to have a benefit cap. In principle, you didn't agree with lowering it to 23,000, and that Jeremy Corbyn was against it.
What I said very clearly, we were opposed to the reduction to £23,000 and £20,000 outside London. I said also that we were reviewing the concept of a benefit cap across the board, but that we do accept that there have to be limits on the amount of money that an individual household can get in benefits. And what we need to do is get to a point where we've got a much fairer set of criteria to analyse and understand why we should be giving family X amount Y. And that should reflect their need, the number of children they've got, the nature of the work they're in, the relative security of that family. Fundamental principles we've always adhered to, but the Tories are breaking. I think most viewers out there will not understand a government that says we penalise children and we take money away from them on the basis of how many children they have.
Although you abstained,
you
did abstain on that issue earlier, but yes, you've changed your mind.
And I voted against it since.
And you've changed your mind.